welcome back to the Creating Synergy podcast. My name's Daniel Franco, and today on the show we have the great man Tim Stollznow, CEO of the potential unicorn startup MyVenue, which is born out of South Australia and now scaling across the world, particularly in the US. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Great to be here, Daniel. Look forward to having a chat.
I was very excited when I received a text from you about a week or two ago saying, Dan, I'm in Adelaide because you've moved over to the US, and you said if you're free for that podcast chat, and we've turned this around pretty quickly. So very excited to have you here while you are here in Adelaide. To understand a little bit more about you and your journey from small town in Northern Territory to leading a global tech firm, what do we need to know about your earliest context to understand who Tim is?
So I was a socially awkward kid. I grew up on a remote community on the edge of the Tenamai Desert, a place called Papania. I was born in Alice Springs. It was pretty tough. I learned a lot of hard life lessons out there. We had no TV, very little radio, no local pinball parlour or anything to amuse ourselves. I shot birds with Shanghais and played with the Aboriginal kids that I was friends with, and looked forward to the mail delivery once a week, which might have had something in there worth reading, but that was it. It was very isolating, very remote, no phones, no local footy team to support, no music other than Charlie Pride and Slim Dusty. But I lobbed in Adelaide. I went to school at Emmanuel College as a boarder, and that really rounded me out. It taught me a lot of things. I grew up quickly. It was tough at first, but I found my tribe, so to speak, and went on to uni from there. So it's a lot of life lessons.
So why Papania? What? Tell me about your parents. Why were you guys there? What?
So my dad was a Lutheran missionary.
Yep.
He began in Alice Springs in the early 60s, before I was born. My mum was a nurse, so they both served on the community out at Papania. Mum ran the local hospital and Dad ran the church, so to speak. That was where we lived. And from as early as I can remember, Mum and Dad said to me, "You're going to Emmanuel College as a boarder." And so when I was 11, or maybe I just turned 12, they chuffed me off to Adelaide and Emmanuel, 3 hours drive and a 2-hour plane flight away.
There you go. So a little bit more about your parents. What were some of the core philosophies that you learnt from them growing up? Because I do know that you were very resourceful back in your day, in Papania, and you were getting the old scrap metal and creating whatever you can. What were some of those core philosophies that you learned?
I think the main philosophy I learnt was service and resourcefulness. When you're out at Papania, we had to, we carted our own petrol out there. I had to pump the petrol into a jerry can and take the jerry can to the car and fill up whatever car we had to fill up on the day. I learnt to help out around the house. We didn't have a local plumber or an electrician or a carpenter. So my dad was quite a resourceful man. He knew a bit about carpentry. His dad was a carpenter. Yeah. So I learnt. Certainly, I learned how to think on my feet and fix things and pull things apart and put them back together again. But I also, Mum and Dad were incredibly service minded. They were out there to serve the community, and me with my two younger sisters, that's what we did. And from there, I think learned how to be resourceful, not just around the house, but also beyond. I helped out at the local store. The store manager went on holidays, and he said, "Well, you can run the store." And there I was, 15 years old, running the community store. So, lots of different experiences being thrown in the deep end, I think, is a good way to put it.
Absolutely. So why Emmanuel College? Why does a family out in the middle of in Alice in Northern Territory say, right, you're going to you're going to Emmanuel College, you're going to board there, and how was that experience for you as a 12-year-old? I understand it would be quite a lonely.
So Emmanuel, well, you know, Dad was a Lutheran pastor, of course. Emmanuel was a Lutheran boarding school.
Yeah.
So there weren't any boarding schools in Alice Springs. I had to go to a boarding school. There was no high school at Papunya.
Yeah.
And Adelaide, probably from a flying perspective and also from a driving perspective, was as close as anywhere to Alice Springs and to Papunya. And Mum and Dad both went to Emmanuel, and in fact our kids also went to Emmanuel. So it was just a logical choice.
Yep.
I just followed on from Mum and Dad.
How was the 12-year-old Tim when he arrived at?
It was the scariest and loneliest experience of my life.
Yeah.
I was in those days, of course, there was no, induction orientation period. There was no visits to the school in September, October the year before to say, look, this is what school life's going to be like. They dropped me off at the boarding house and literally left me in the lobby with my suitcases and got in their car with my two sisters and drove off back to Central Australia. No phones. I could write a letter to Mum and Dad, and that was about a 2 or 3 week turnaround to get a response. So I felt it just the most lonely and abandoned, I think would be a good word, child that you could ever imagine. I mean, I didn't know how to mix with kids. I didn't know how to mix with white kids. I didn't have any music or TV shows that anyone else knew about that, or that everyone had their own favourite TV show or their favourite footy team, or they had a Sturt, jacket of some sort, or a Port Adelaide or whatever, team. I never had any of that. I knew how to pull apart hot water systems and recover the copper out of a hot water system, and that was not a great skill to be promoting in a boarding house.
No. So what did the first few years of boarding school look like for you then?
Well, the first few years were horrible. I dreaded going back to college. I dreaded the end of school holidays. I was fortunate. I went home for most school holidays. So we had three terms, and I went home in between each term. That was, I looked forward to going home, and I hated coming back to Emmanuel. It was lonely for me. But bit by bit, I found my tribe, so to speak. I found my way. I realised that my life wasn't with the cool kids; it was with the dorky kids, and I found some friends, and I found some places where I could go on an exit weekend. So sometimes the boarders would all get kicked out of the boarding house, and you'd all charge off back to somewhere for a weekend. And most of the boarders were from country South Australia, so they would just go home, and of course I couldn't go home to Papunya. It would take me a full day to get back. So, I found some mates, and I gradually found my way. I just had to eke out this survival, and I was picked on a lot. I was an easy target. I didn't know how really to defend myself, both verbally or physically, and so that certainly was tough for me. And it straightened me out, and I learned to work it out. But I certainly acknowledged that it wasn't for everyone, and there was some kids that was not a good place for them to be in that environment. But for me, I worked out there was this one kid who was a year older than me, and I won't mention his name, but he used to pick on me all the time in front of his mates, and I got him on his own one day, and I gave him a bit of a beating, and he ended up admitting or giving up. I think that was his term. I had him in a headlock or something, and that was the start. I thought I got to get some respect here. I got to push back a little bit, because otherwise I'm just going to get broken.
Yeah. And so there's a movie that you watched a called it was a World War II movie called The Great Escape. Can you tell us a little bit about that while you were in your
so we had this
boarding school?
we had this common room that we used to go to, and it was on it was like a transportable, and it was on probably 6-inch high concrete blocks, and you could just get underneath it, as a little kid. Maybe it was 8 inches or 10 inches high, but you could just get underneath it. We sort of crawled under there one day, and there was this area that was had a little bit more space than the rest of the this underneath area, and we thought, I wonder if you could, we started scratching around, and it was the sand was quite diggable, and we started digging, and we created this room underneath the common room where you had to literally lie on the ground, and a bit like The Great Escape, you would roll in when you make sure no one's watching, of course. Yeah. You'd roll in, and every day we would dig this space when no one else was around or when we were a bit bored, and we'd spread the dirt out in the yard, just like they did on The Great Escape. And
Shawshank, actually, wasn't it?
But one of the cool things we did down there was you could smoke.
Yeah, there you go.
Not that I would advocate smoking, but we used to smoke down there, and I think it was one of the school masters who noticed some smoke coming up through the floorboards, or could smell smoke coming up through the floorboards of the common room, and went down and found.
So how big was this hole in the end that you?
Oh, you could comfortably fit 4 people in there sitting. I mean, it was crammed. 4 people was crammed, and if you smoked with 4 people in there, it was pretty smoky. But it was big enough that you could sort of sit in. I mean, we were like 13 years old. I mean, we weren't big kids, and you could sit in there hunched over and giggle, have some fun.
That's hilarious. That's very good. So you mentioned, I think in a previous conversation, that as a kid you're always looking for things to do. You said you were resourceful, and one thing you've said to me a few times in our previous conversations is that you always like to have fun as a kid, and hearing you just dig holes and find ways to amuse yourself. Is that something that you still apply today? Is fun still something that you...
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think having fun in whatever way, whatever your humour is, and whatever you decide is your thing, you've got to break up your life, and you don't have to, but I always find it's making light of a difficult situation, or the camaraderie that's developed either at work or with your friends or with your family when you're having fun, whatever that looks like, is special, and it's the things to me that give life meaning, when you can look back and say, oh, remember when, and there's obviously plenty of stories like that for me and for my friends and family.
Yeah, absolutely. What does fun look like to you in the context of work?
So work's interesting. I've obviously thought a lot about work, and running businesses is a lot of fun, but it's also very serious. People are putting their lives in whatever company. I always say you spend a lot of time at work. You better do something you enjoy most of the time. Yeah. No job is fun all the time.
Correct.
So do something you enjoy, but treat it seriously. Your career is very important, and I would say always, don't change just because you think something's greener on the other side. Be very careful about change, because mostly it's not greener.
Yeah.
And not to say you should never change what you do, but just be, always go with an open mind that, hey, can I make my job better here? Is it really bad all the time? And is over there going to be better? The other thing I'd say is that, and we'll talk about this a bit later, I'm sure, that every day you go to work is an opportunity to make a difference. It's an opportunity to make a difference for your colleagues, for the work that you do, for your company, but most importantly for you.
Yeah.
And so that is that's something that I try to do. That's something that I try to reflect on in every day when you go to work.
Yeah, that's what we're here for. Some sort of purpose, isn't it?
Yeah,
To
yeah.
make a difference. So you talked about career there. Let's talk about yours. Go back to 1998. When you were still in school. Actually, we'll start there. Where there was a teacher of yours that said, "Tim, have you thought about doing an engineering degree?"
Yeah. So those were the days when you didn't really have career counsellors, and if you did, they certainly didn't know anything about technology. And I was quite interested in technology for some reason. One of my cousins showed me a programmable calculator in the mid-'70s, and I thought, that is really cool. So I was super interested in computers, actually, but I didn't really know what a computer did or how powerful it was or how to program it. And my science teacher, my physics teacher, Neville Reimers, came up to me halfway through year 12 and said, what are you doing next year? And I said, I don't know. And he said, I think you should go to uni. And I said, oh, okay, yeah. What do I need to do that? And he said, well, you need to apply and da-da-da-da. So I said, well, what do you think I should do? And he said, I think you should do engineering. And then he just handed me this SATAC, which is a tertiary admissions form or something, and said, here, you need to fill this out. And really that was it. It was just as simple and as straightforward as that. And I basically decided from there was no engineering degree that was computing, but there was this degree called electrical engineering. I didn't even know what electrical and electronic engineers did, but I knew that there was a computing element to this degree, and I thought that's for me.
How's that for a sliding doors moment?
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure you and anyone else that's listening would be able to point to dozens of times in their lives when something's come along and just gone bam, and all of a sudden you're heading down this direction and you've gone over there. And even sometimes at the time you don't realise the significance of that small decision, but over the course of a year or two or 5 or 10, it's really sailed your life off in a completely different direction.
I think there's a learning lesson in the fact that you took that advice.
Yeah.
Because people are giving you advice all the time.
Yeah.
And it's just this sort of, it seems to me this like, it's the old Richard Branson quote, say yes and then figure it out later, so to speak.
Well, mine is bite off more than you can chew and then chew like hell.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. So this leads, so you go do an engineering degree, and then this leads to, in 1998, you have a choice.
No, 88.
88, sorry. 88. 1988, you have a choice between a stable role at Telstra, or leap into this unknown startup world in Adelaide with a company called Quest. So, what was it about about this decision that made you?
So sliding doors moment again. You had to do an internship, like work experience, to finish your degree. You had to do 12 weeks of work experience, and I didn't have anyone in industry. I didn't know anyone. My dad was a Lutheran pastor. He doesn't know. He's working up in the bush. He doesn't know anyone that's involved with defence or with science and technology. So I was getting desperate at the end of my third year at uni, actually my fourth year at uni because I failed second year. But I was getting desperate, and I went to one of the lecturers and I said, "Have you got any ideas? I've got to do this 12 weeks of work experience." And he said, "Oh, look, go and see this guy at the technology park," which was which was to become the multi-function Polis that a lot of people in Adelaide would remember. But I went there, and I turned up, I had shorts, thongs on. This guy, Malcolm Raymond, looked at me and he said, "You're the worst dressed candidate for an interview that I've ever seen in my life." And I said, "Oh, look, I'm sorry, I was just on my way, out to the country somewhere, and I saw the sign and I realised that this is where Technology Park is, and here I am." And anyway, they offered me a position, and I ended up doing some software work for this startup company called Quest. Yeah. And I just thought, this is it. I loved it. I loved programming. I loved everything about that. There was a really fine engineer named Greg Fidock who I ended up working with and working for, who worked for this startup, and I love my work. I fell in love with it. So at the end of my final year, I said to Greg, I said, look, I've got this offer to go to Sydney with Telstra, or I can come and work for you work for this startup. And he said, oh, hang on, let me go and crunch some numbers. And they offered me a job. And
Yeah, wow, brilliant. So, and this is where it all starts, really, isn't it? What happens here now at Quest?
So we were in the computer-aided design industry, which is a specialist area of technology. You know, we designed products for other designers to use. We had this technology that we're working on. Greg was the hardware guy. I was the software guy. We worked on this product. We released it to the world. I got to travel. It was fantastic. And then it was only maybe 3 years, 2.5 years, and laser, some new technology came along which just smashed up what we had developed. I mean, you know, our market went from, you know, here, you know, from high to low in a matter of months as this new technology launched onto the market. So we had to find something else to do. Yeah. And we developed the smart keyboard for what we thought was the computer-aided design industry, and then all of a sudden it was used in these other markets. And again, sliding doors moment.
Yeah. So take us something you've glossed over that. I think there's more in that. I mean, the getting smashed in the market because what did you learn in that experience when your business is going down one track and then all of a sudden a competitor or a different type of technology comes along and wipes it from under your feet?
I think one of the things I learned was, you know, as the saying goes, make hay while the sun shines. Yeah. I mean, you've got these opportunities, these windows sliding, you know, these windows that move past in your life, and sometimes there's an opportunity and you make the most of it, and then when that opportunity moves on, you better find something else. Yeah. So I think what I learned was that you've got to have a plan, but the plan can't be rock solid. The plan's got to have some pivots, potential pivots that you're already considering, is to say, well, what happens if this doesn't work out? You know, what are my options here? How am I going to set myself up?
Contingency plans, so to speak.
Yeah.
So where did the idea of the smart keyboard, because this is the thing that really took off for you guys, isn't it? Where did this come from?
Well, so we were in the computer-aided design industry, and we had.
So for those who don't know, computer-aided design is the old CAD.
CAD. And we had access to some markets overseas that we had sold, and we thought, you know, what else can we do for computer-aided design, since, you know, this laser technology's come along and smashed up what we were doing, you know, previously. And we came up with this idea of a smart keyboard, and it was before touch screens and really before the advent of the mouse. People were using, you know, Control Shift Function 2 to do certain things, and then they'd have to, you know, go and enable this functionality to do that. And we thought, wouldn't it be good if we came up with a smart keyboard that you could program these keys, these complex key functions into extra keys on your keyboard? And we called it a VersaKey, and we developed this VersaKey, which was a computer keyboard with these extra keys on them that you could program essentially macros into. And it was, you know, early days Linux, pre-Windows, it was DOS and the Mac. And we found, we sold this keyboard around the world, but we found that it was used in bottle shops and petrol stations, service stations, and also in like dry cleaners. Yeah, right. And we I guess took advantage of that over the next years.
So what does scale look like? How does a guy from Northern Territory, you know, in the middle of nowhere, create this smart keyboard and then travel all over the world? What does that look like?
Well, it's scary. You know, it wasn't always easy. I'd spent, you know, we tried to sell the keyboard in South America. I went to Buenos Aires when I was a young fella, not much English. You know, lobbed into cities. There was no, you know, mobile phones with maps on or Uber or anything.
Did you go with
like
the
that.
shorts and thongs? Is it?
Not quite. But you know, you learn. You learn every week, you know, and little by little you sort of think, well, I won't do that again. But you know, that was all right. I'll build on that. So it was exciting, but it was hard work. I'll be honest. It wasn't an easy path. And there were people said to me, I looked at other engineers that I went through university with, and they'd gone off to have careers in defence and larger corporates, and they were, smashing it, and I was, working hard for seemingly not much progress, other than being autonomous and learning a lot as we grew.
Yeah.
And growth was pretty slow in those.
Were you comparing yourself to them in those stages?
Oh, I think that's naturally that you do, or at least you use that as a bit of a benchmark. You look at your career and think, well, okay, I'm here. How am I going to get to there, or how am I going to get ahead here? How am I going to? And you're going out with your mates, and your mates are telling you sometimes, oh, what are you doing, wasting your career at Quest? You've got all these other opportunities you could take advantage of. But I stuck it out because I believed in it. I believed in what I was doing.
So you became the CEO of Quest in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
You were still relatively young at that point. I think
I was.
Mid-20s. Is that?
I was.
Is that correct?
I was probably 30 by
mid-90s.
Yeah.
Mid-90s. So why did they trust Tim at that point to take over the company, the owners of the company?
I was, for some reason, I wanted to be a manager. I wanted to, I believed that I could help make the place better. And I learned some skills. I was involved with a football club as a young fella. I wasn't much of a footballer, but I knew a bit about the administration. I had a collapsed lung and I couldn't play football, so I became a football manager, and then I became football director, and then from there I became president of our club. That's when I was really young, like maybe 25. I was president of our football club.
Yeah, as in AFL football.
No, as in Australian rules football.
Rules football.
Yeah. It was called Adelaide Lutheran.
Yep.
Stuck with the Lutherans, and I learned a lot about leadership and influence and persuasion and about being organised and having regular meetings and actions and I thought, if I can take that into my work life now, that would be really beneficial for Quest.
Yeah, 100%. What did you learn about leadership, influence, and persuasion in that early stage?
Well, I learned that you can't. The advantage with an amateur sports club and volunteers is you can't just clobber people into a task or into some responsibility. You really need to justify why you think something's important and why you think that they're the right person to do that.
Yeah.
And that was incredibly powerful, I think, as you go then into your work career and leadership at work, because you can walk around and rule by fear and intimidation, but that's not scalable and well, it's not for me. I don't think that's the right way of building a business. You need to empower people, and you need to give them a sense of responsibility. So learning some of those skills in a volunteer environment was really powerful.
Yeah. I'm thinking of your parents, and you said earlier that you learnt service and resourcefulness. Service, obviously, giving back to the community. Do you think that's outside of the leadership stuff that you learn? What do you gain from giving back to the community? And you personally, it sounds like you're passionate about it. I know a little bit about you, and I know you are passionate about it. I think, what is the benefit? Because I get involved in my kids' basketball clubs and everything like that. And for me, I feel like home at a club, especially a sporting club. I grew up in that world. And I think since I've been involved in that world again, I'm enjoying life more when it just becomes less about me and what I'm trying to create and where we're trying to grow as a business, but about how do I just get involved and help this club grow as well.
Yeah.
Do you think that this is something that's been critical to your growth and your learnings over the year and your success?
I think, you learn a lot from all sorts of, facets of your life, but giving back to your community is really important for the social fabric of our world.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of volunteers. There are so many volunteers that are contributing every day. They're marking the the white chalk on the ground. They're waving flags. They're blowing whistles. They're keeping the time. They're washing jumpers or Guernseys or whatever. This is such an important part of our social fabric, and I actually think that we've got to be careful because we keep making service or volunteer more difficult. Well, if you want to be a volunteer, you need to do this course, you need to be accredited like that. Then insurance is going to be this and on and on and on it goes. And eventually some volunteers go, you know what, this is too hard.
Yeah, it is.
And so what happens then is society has to somehow pick that up.
Yeah.
And someone needs to pay for that. And then it becomes all corporatized and red tape. And so there's this delicate balance as we evolve as humans, as to how much is run by government and how much is and organisations and how much is run by the community themselves.
Yeah, no, it is difficult. I'm team manager of my daughter's basketball teams, and they play quite high up. But the process of me becoming team, I had to go through working with children's child. It was weeks and weeks of like. It is. Yeah, it's
a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. Obviously, because my daughter's there, I wanted to. But if you're just volunteering because you just want to be part of a club, it can become quite tedious. So let's go back to Quest. We are we're in the formative years of Quest, and you're CEO, and then it just goes bang.
So we developed this smart keyboard, and then we found out that it was used a lot in bottle shops and in dry cleaners and in service stations as a point of sale keyboard.
Yeah.
So it's used with a computer to replace a cash register.
Was it made for that, or
not at all? But that's where we found it. It was like pay petrol Bowser #1. Or dry cleaners suit.
They could code it
They could code it. That was the whole thing about this keyboard. It was programmable, or a 6-pack of beer or a carton of beer. And then I got involved. Went out and looked at how it was being used, and I went to these bottle shops and talked to some of these guys, and they were going, "This is really cool. We need to put one of these in the front bar. We need one of these in the lounge bar in the pub," and you couldn't put a computer in the front bar because you got beer and Coke and cleaning and that sort of stuff. So I developed, or the company developed, a smart keyboard for pubs.
Yeah,
that's the bottom line. Yeah. And it was, we called it
that flat one with the cover on
it. Yeah, with a display on it.
Yeah.
And we sold through a reseller channel into pubs and clubs in Australia, and away we went. Away we went. It took a couple of years, but we had 2 lucky breaks. Well, you get multiple lucky breaks. But one thing was the Y2K. So at the end of, and a lot of people probably think this is weird now, but at the end of the last century, there was all this panic that all these computer systems were going to blow up and disappear into the ether at the end of the century because, you'd go from year 99 to year 0.
Yeah.
So the government gave all of these small businesses money to update their point of sale system. So that was great. And then the GST in Australia, the GST came in, which is the goods and services tax.
Yeah.
And the government gave all these small businesses money again to update their point of sale systems and to make sure that they could support a GST. So there was money that flowed out.
Right place, right time.
Oh yeah, right place. And we had this product, and we sold, and then so we grew quite a bit off that. But at the same time, I thought we've got to get this product into export. We'd exported this product that we had 8 years earlier or 7 years earlier. We hadn't really exported our point of sale terminal, and we talked to the Australian government, to Austrade at the time, and they said, "Look, South Africa's just opening up. Go and exhibit in South Africa. We'll help cover your costs." And we went to a trade show in South Africa, met a company from the UK. They said, "This product's great for cinemas." So we started selling into cinemas in the UK and Europe, so that they could do sell ice creams and hot dogs and whatever. And then from there into the US, I met a guy in the UK who said, "You're wasting your time in cinemas. It's small fry. This product is right for stadiums and arenas in the US." And 99, we did, through them as a reseller, we did the Staples Center where the LA Lakers play.
Yeah, nice.
And I was there for the opening, and I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And all these people were like, oh, where's so-and-so who plays for the Lakers, or Wayne Gretzky who played for the Kings. But I was more interested in where's Jack Nicholson, who was the number one ticket holder at the time. But once we went live there, I knew that was it. That was our
doors open.
That was the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. That was where we needed to be, and then we went and developed our own back office software for that space, specifically for stadiums and arenas in the US. And by 2001, our reseller had decided to get out of the market, and we went direct. And we did NFL stadiums. We did the Denver Broncos. We did a ton of Major League Baseball venues, and it was the most, for me, it was the most, the most adrenaline you could ever imagine. It was just, it was an incredible period of probably 6 years of growth and travel and experiences. That was amazing. Yeah.
That is an amazing story. I'm gonna touch back onto something that you said, and it stuck out to me. You went to a trade show, right? You went and spoke to people.
Yeah.
You didn't just try to sell over the internet. You actually went and got in front of people and tried to create relationships and grow your product and service that way. I know that's something that you're pretty passionate about as well, is about getting out of your comfort zone and going and speaking and talking and face to face, isn't it? That's something you're pretty.
It is. I don't know of any other way of doing it. Well, certainly any way of doing it effectively. You have to go to the market. If you want to sell into the US, you've got to go to the US, and you've got to go there often. You know, sometimes you need to go there 3 or 4 times, or 5 or 6 times over the course of 1, 2, or 3 years, and that that's where you learn. It's where you make relationships. And it's where you gain trust.
Yeah. Why is that not being adopted as much these days? And why do you think people are keyboard warriors in the sense that they just want to sell from behind a computer screen as opposed to?
Well, I mean, COVID was bad. COVID smashed people up. Travel's expensive since then. I think it'll come back. I hope it'll come back. I do believe that there's people that shy away from travel. I mean, travel's hard. You know, you get stuck on the other side of the world. The airport you're flying into has been, has got a blizzard or there's a storm, and you get stuck in some weird city, and you've got to find your way back. And sometimes you lose your luggage, or you've got all these other challenges with travel. Travel is not easy. And I think that, but I'm a big believer in travel. I think travel is a necessity if you want to run a global business. And I believe that any company from Australia that has an exportable product or service should be encouraged to do that.
Yeah.
So this is where organisations, associations, and the government. And there's a lot of programs that exist, but we've got to keep doing more of that. We've got to work out how we can develop smart technology and smart process and good products, how we can develop that more in Australia and sell that to the world.
Yeah. So I'm going to just jump to a question which I think is relevant to MyVenue, which you're running now, and you've built up in a similar sort of trajectory. But you won the National Export Awards for MyVenue, right, recently. So just on that point, and what you've just said there, which is very much around thinking a global mindset, isn't it? And for Australians, that can be quite tough. For me, it's taken me years to think about outside of the walls of South Australia, right? And then start pushing more into the Australian markets, let alone then going overseas. And how did you go about in your early days, specifically when you were a young CEO of Quest, how did you go about changing your mindset to think globally? Or was that just something that came naturally to you?
So the guy that owned Quest, when I started working for Quest in the 80s and early 90s, was a gentleman who lived in Melbourne. So he had his own business over there, but he was from the UK and he was an engineer.
Okay.
And he was key to my development. I mean, I have a lot of mentors that I can point to, but this gentleman, David Brown, was amazing for me. He was born in the UK, he'd lived in Germany, he'd lived in the US, and he landed with his family in Australia and was quite he was a good businessman, let me just say that. He travelled. He knew how to travel. He knew how to sell. I was an engineer. I developed products for Quest, and he taught me, and I followed him, and we travelled together a number of times overseas. I learned a lot from him, and I learned about that travel is, you've got to follow certain rules, but it's not the scary, doing business in another country is not the scary proposition that you might originally think it is.
How do you go about? Trade shows is one aspect for those who can't really sell, like for people who might be selling services or something like that. How do you think about bridging the gap of leaving the walls of Australia and going into international markets?
So Americans are great networkers. Americans, they can fight tooth and nail all year as competitors, and then once a year, just about, I don't know of any industry in America that doesn't have an association and some trade show associated with that. Once a year, they get together for 5 days, and they all tell each other what they've learned in the last year. Yeah. They stand up and they say what their plans are and what their roadmap is and how they're going to take on the market. And they go out and have cocktail parties and dinners and shared experiences, and then they all go home and are competitors again. Yeah, you need to get to that. Yeah, you need to get to that trade show. Yeah. And I'm a big believer. You get there and you learn. You talk to people. Yeah. You go around, find competitive products, find aligned products, talk to people, ask them. Any questions. Americans are very open. Yeah, very happy to speak, and you can learn a lot. And then there's a few little tricks like when you go to a trade show and you're a first year attendee, you're not going to get invited to the opening night cocktail party. You're not going to get invited to the awards of such and such. But find out where they go afterwards, because they always go out to a bar somewhere and go there. Yeah. Great tip. Do
you know Andrew Downs?
I know of him. No, I don't.
Founder of Sage Automation, and he attributes the success of Sage to the trade shows that when he went to the US, it was the trade show, and that literally became how they grew and opened his mind into what the world was doing.
You don't have to have a booth there. You can just go as an attendee, as a delegate, and just go and talk to people.
Tour around. Yeah, I love it. You mentioned earlier that, in not so many words, but you said that there's a kind of formula that needs to be followed. I'm interested in the word formula. I think that's something that I've always thought business was built off. Business is just a bunch of formulas, and if you get the right formulas, that can lead to scale, right? Yeah. Is there any particular type of formula that now, given the growth of MyVenue as well and what you learned at Quest, is there a particular formula that you've learned about scalability, about scaling business?
That when Australia had a recession in the early 90s, I was like, MyVenue, Quest in those days. Quest was not going anywhere. We had flatlined. Our revenue was bubbling along the bottom. And I thought, what am I going to do? This could end in tears. I went off and did some study. But B, I thought, I'm going to take this time to set our business up for growth. And it wasn't just a chance thing. We were involved with an association, and they said, we're doing this thing called ISO 9001, which is a quality assurance program. So I went to a meeting of that, and I thought, that makes a lot of sense. So I think learning about process and learning about how to build accountability and build quality into your service or your product, so that as you scale, you understand who's doing what sort of product you're delivering, how you're keeping your customers happy, how you're dealing with issues that will arise from time to time. This is it's the only way I know of to grow a business, is to make sure business systems and business processes grow with it. Does everyone have a position description? Do they know what their job is and their task is? How are people onboarded as they come into your organisation? How do you ensure that you maintain the culture as you grow? So these are a lot of, I guess, foundation blocks for making sure that your business is in a good place to scale.
Why do you think the process? I mean, I'm talking from experience of starting my own company, and I'm a naturally born salesperson that just goes out and tries to sell ice to an Eskimo, so to speak. I've always had this impression, and it's only recent that I've learned differently, but I've always had this thought process that, look, if the more I sell, the more cash I've got to fix those processes in the background. Which in somewhat it can hold you back, that mentality. It's almost like you need to fix the processes first, or you need to kind of do both at the same time. Is that your experience as well?
Yeah. I mean, I always said, and I've been involved with some not-for-profit groups, obviously MyVenue now, the startup sector, which I love, and I'm sure we'll touch on at some stage. You got to do both, and you've got to do both in parallel. You don't want to get ahead of yourself with business processes, because with business processes comes inflexibility, or can come inflexibility.
Correct.
And the lack of agility, that you get bogged down in systems and processes. So you need to grow. It's a delicate balance. It is a delicate balance about having enough processes so that you can control what you do and how you do it, but not having too much so that innovation is clobbered. Is stymied.
Where do you place the who, not how? I mean, you're an engineer by trade, right? So doing the how is something that would, I guess, you would take pleasure in, trying to figure it out, solve problems, build the product. But one thing I am learning is that to lead a team and to lead a successful team, it really is about the people that you surround yourself, 100% about the people you surround yourself with them, and empowering them and creating the right conditions for them to succeed. How have you gone about building the right teams so that you can be successful?
So a lot of this comes back to my experience outside of paid employment. With being on a community committee of some sort. Is that you ultimately need to empower people, and there's I think one of the courses I did when I took that sort of time out as Australia was sinking into the swamp, to study was about delegation, and delegation's really important. And there's all these different levels of delegation. So you can delegate everything to a person once you trust them and once they're up and running and they've drunk the MyVenue Kool-Aid.
The Kool-Aid, yeah.
But also delegation can be just like go away and research this and bring let me know what you find out. Go away and research this and come back with a recommendation. Go away and research this. Come back with a recommendation and a course of action. And so you go through these various levels of delegation, and ultimately most people they like autonomy or some level of autonomy. The other thing I found out with business is that you can have a lot of different personalities in a business and have a great business, because some people like to just beaver away behind the scenes. Some people like to be out at the coal face,
the rock
knocking
stars.
down, kicking down doors. Other people like to be problem solvers. Other people like to be more selling, more customer focused. Other people like doing forecasting or accounting. So, and with not just with all those skills, but with those different personalities, you have quite almost like a soup of characteristics and individual styles, and on their own, including whoever happens to be the leader, you might be a very small part of what this machine is ultimately doing. And I think businesses are amazing. I just think business makes the world go round. Organised work effort is what has brought humans out of the jungle in Africa and got us to where we are now.
Yeah, 100%.
It's quite amazing.
That goes back to your favorite book there, which is
is.
The Sapiens.
Yeah.
Now we're in 2008 now, and Quest has just been acquired.
Yeah.
Tell us about that experience.
So we were, my wife and I and 2 kids were living in Denver at the time, and Quest was the number one supplier into stadiums and arenas in North America. We had over half of the NFL stadiums, over half of Major League Baseball. We were going to World Series and Super Bowls and Stanley Cups, and
amazing journey,
and having just an amazing time. And this company came along and effectively said, "Look, we've been trying to get into this industry for 4 years. We've burned a lot of money. We haven't been able to do it. Can we talk about you guys becoming part of our organisation?" And that was about a 6-month process, and they bought Quest. It was the right time.
Yeah,
I was burnt out. I was tired. It was fun, but I didn't know how to scale to that next level.
Yep.
We'd reached about 80 employees, and I was concerned about how much. So they really came along at the right time, and we became part of this NASDAQ listed, so this listed US company in Atlanta, and they moved our family to Atlanta, and I worked for them for a few years, and quickly decided that corporate life was not for me. Apart from the fact that we'd gone through a global financial crisis, and there was all sorts of challenges there.
So did pretty well out of it.
Yeah. I was off. I mean, I did well out of obviously Quest, but I also did well out of being part of this listed company.
Yeah.
I worked for them under contract for 2 years. That was a good time for me and for our family. But ultimately, and then I moved back to Australia and led their organisation in the Asia Pacific region, which was again a lot of fun, a good learning curve. But ultimately, I decided that wasn't being part of a big corporate organisation wasn't for me. I mean, they had thousands and thousands of employees, and I liked the autonomy of smaller business.
Yeah.
So I got out and actually fell into. I did some study, but I also fell into the startup sector in South Australia, and that's another journey.
So you're in this position now. You've moved the family back to Australia. Financially free in all aspects, and able to play around in the startup world and get involved more back in the community and do some stuff for the like. I mean, how does it feel during this time where you've sold and you're able just to almost find what you love to do, like you said earlier, find something that you love to do?
Well, it was great for 3 months.
Yeah.
And then you start thinking, well, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
I'm not going to do nothing. So I got involved. I decided that I didn't want to travel. I needed a break from travel, and I didn't want to manage people.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, what am I going to do? I thought, I wouldn't mind doing the company directors course. So I studied the company, did the company directors course with the Australian Institute of Company Directors. And then I went off, and I'd been out of Adelaide, so I had to start from scratch. I had to start networking. I had to start going out to lunches and meeting people again, because we'd been running this, global company, and I'd been living in the US for a few years, and so that was an interesting. I was not. I thought, gee, I've got to try and work out what I'm going to do, and so I got involved with some boards. I got involved with some Aboriginal organisations in Central Australia. So I was back at Urara College as chair of this Aboriginal boarding college in Alice Springs. I was involved with Fink River Mission, another organisation in the centre. So I was chair of that organisation. It was a lot of work, but I knew that I could make a difference because of my background and what I knew. I was back out of Papunya and seeing some of my mates from 30 years ago, and they're like, Japanati, which was my skin name, and hugs, and you're a Papunya man, and that was very powerful back in Alice Springs, because the Aboriginal people could look at you and they would go, we know where you're from, we trust you, we've got a relationship with you. So I enjoyed that. I was on the board, those boards up there for 12 years, travelled up there a lot. I was on some other boards. I got involved with the property sector here in Adelaide, and then I also got involved with the startup sector, and that was also where I knew that I could make a difference, and I knew that I had a passion to help these companies be better and go off and conquer the world.
So you said you didn't want to travel much, but it sounded like you were still traveling quite a bit. I mean, I think for me, one question I do ask a lot is about family on the show, and balancing a successful career and trying to realize your visions of what you want to be as a human, and what you want to do in business can be quite a struggle when trying to manage like sort of flourishing relationships in the same space, in loving relationships. What's been your philosophy on this family and business?
It's a challenge. It's always hard to get right. When our family was young, my wife Michelle, she's an accountant. She was involved with trying to have her own career. We had a young family. I would literally come home from work some days, and it'd be Thursday or Friday, and I'd say, I've got to go to the US next week. And Michelle would be like, well, what about this kids play? Or I was hoping you'd pick the kids up.
Yeah, how many kids you got? Two.
So it was hard work, and it is, there is a degree of guilt that you have when you miss certain milestones in not just for your kids or for your family, but also for friends. I missed 40th birthdays. I missed, weddings and 30, whatever. You missed. You did miss some things, but you've also got this. Hey, I wanted a career, and I wanted to achieve something for, in those days, Quest, now MyVenue. So you got to get the balance right, and you got to make sure that when you're here, that you're present, and that Michelle ended up helping one of her friends in a hairdressing salon, and so she would work all day Saturday, and so when I was in town, I'd look after the kids. We'd ride bikes and go out and do stuff, and it was a lot of fun, and the building a relationship with your children is super important. You need to be there. You need to be present for them when you can. Yeah,
100%. Where did you place your priority?
Well, it changed. It changed a little bit. I mean, I have to say that my priority during those periods from probably 2003 to 2006 was a lot of travel.
Yeah.
I was away. I mean, I don't want to overstate it. I mean, plenty of people do travel.
Yeah.
Plenty of people spend time on the road, but it was hard work for our family. But it was a decision that Michelle and I both made together that was the right thing to do at the time, because I believed in, we were being successful globally. And the other thing I'd say is, fortunately, our kids got to travel as well sometimes.
Yeah.
So there was a benefit for them. They loved it. They were, both Jacob and Emily were in the US before they were 18 months old. So, and we traveled often for work, and then I would tag a
family holiday.
And when we moved over there, we sort of tricked them a little bit. We went to Miami. We took the kids to the Orange Bowl, which was a big football game in Miami, and then we went to Disney World, and we went to Cape Canaveral, and then we flew to Denver, and there was snow, and the kids are like, America's the best place on earth. And we're like, love it. They're like, yep. And I go, great, because tomorrow we're going to go and look at a school.
Yeah.
Because we're planning to move here next in 6 months' time. And they're like, ugh.
How old were they then?
Emily was 7 and Jacob was 9.
Yeah, there you go. Do you look back and wish you did it differently? Or do you? Are
No.
you?
I never have.
Yeah.
Never have. I think, you learn. You have to learn. You learn from your mistakes. You learn from your successes. Probably learn more from your mistakes.
Yeah.
But I don't think I've never been one to look back and say, "Oh, I should have done that differently." You make the best decisions you can at the time, and then life rolls along.
So you dealt with a blow in 2016. Not so much a blow, but a pretty confronting situation where you were diagnosed with prostate cancer.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about this time? It must have been a life-changing moment for you.
Yeah. My dad had prostate cancer. My grandfather had prostate cancer. I was doing the tests, the PSA tests. Any men out there between 40 and 50 or 55 get your PSA tested.
Yeah, 100%.
And my PSA was going up, and I was keeping an eye on it. And they said, "Oh, you need to have a biopsy." And I was like, "Oh, that's scary." But did the biopsy and came back positive. I had early stage prostate cancer, and it was a shock. Yeah, it's absolutely a shock when anyone who's being diagnosed with cancer will remember, like yesterday, the time when the doctor looks them in the eye and says, however they say it, "I haven't got the best news," or whatever it is. You've got cancer.
I'm feeling sick in my stomach thinking about it.
Yeah, fortunately, in hindsight, it was diagnosed very early, but it was getting worse. I made the decision to have my prostate out. I'd done some research about that, and I said, no, this is. So I found a good urologist and had the operation in 2017 to have my prostate out, and touch wood. It's all good. You go through the uncertainty in that. I've sort of shortened things down. There's a lot of uncertainty in testing, and even after you have your prostate out, you've got to get retested, and every time you get it retested, you're sort of holding your breath because you're like, please don't come back. But that's now 7 years ago or 6.5 years ago, and I still get tested regularly, but life is good.
Yeah, excellent. That's a good news story. We've had Andrew Bills on the show, who's the CEO of SA Power Networks, and he went through a similar experience. The thing that saved him as well was this regular testing. So we made a call out last time. Is like, that is literally the one thing that you can do. I know I do that now. Ever since that podcast where he came on, I'm not even 40 yet. I'm 40 next year, but I'm just like every 6 months I'm just getting tested. I'm getting all my bloods. I've even gone and sought out an endocrinologist who can help me understand my bloods better and everything that's happening to me, from my urine samples to my blood tests to my PSAs to everything, just to learn more about my body and actually appreciate that looking after it is the most important thing that we can do.
And we're very fortunate. I mean, we're very fortunate in Australia. The US health system's not quite as available as what it is in Australia. Let's just say that. But in Australia, early detection of anything is a good thing.
Yeah,
it is. You mightn't want to find out about that, but early detection is the best chance of a better outcome.
Yep.
So whatever test is made available to you, do it.
Yeah, 100%. Would that be your advice for anyone listening in right now who's, not taking their health seriously, not taking their own, the call signs, and not even just the health from a cancer point of view, but from a mental health perspective? Is like, what's your suggestion for people when looking after oneself?
Well, you've got to. I mean, you haven't got anything if you haven't got your health right. I mean, you've got look after your health. I mean, but have fun. I mean, my wife will tell me, I'd probably eat too much chocolate.
Yeah.
And probably have a few too many red wines of the weekend.
Yeah.
But
you like your coffee too.
Yeah, I like my coffee. But that's healthy, right?
Yeah. Don't add sugar.
But I think look after your health. Don't go crazy.
Yeah.
Don't let it rule your
Moderation.
life too much. But when you do need those touch points of regular checkups, I think, and in our fantastic society in that we live, that's available to us.
Yeah.
that's a good thing to do.
Yeah, 100%. I liken it to business. You know, you're checking your data every single week, trying to understand what the data and the inputs and the KPIs. Why wouldn't you do the same thing with your body? Like it's just track. It's just
and everyone starts off. You know, I was not everyone, but a lot of people start off when you're in your 20s and 30s, and you think you're invincible.
Yeah,
right. Not being healthy. That's something that happens when you're 70 plus. But the bottom line is that as you get into your 30s and 40s, that's the time to start getting regular checkups, and then certainly through your 50s.
Absolutely. Very good. So now 2019, we decided that MyVenue was going to be launched. And I know it came off the back of some conversations that you had with a mutual friend of ours, Adam Vontoff, actually, who's been on the show. He's the previous COO of Adelaide Oval. Can you take us back to the moment where the idea was born, the idea for MyVenue was born?
So I've had a long-standing relationship with Adam. Adam knew that I was involved with the stadium and arena sector. I'd stayed in touch with the hospitality sector through the sort of 2010 to 2019 time period. I'd broadly kept an eye on the industry in the US. And one day I literally got a call from Adam saying, have you got some time? I've got some ideas. Or I've got, this challenge. And I went and saw Adam, and Adam said, the point of sale in the stadium and arena industry is not developed where I think it should have. And I've got some ideas on how we might be able to do something together to ultimately create a new product for the market.
Yeah, great.
And
so, what problem were you trying to solve?
So we were trying to solve the speed of service problem. So it's a challenge around the world is speed of service.
Yep.
Speed of service and labour. It takes a lot of labour to deliver food and beverage to tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in a sports stadium.
Yep.
And it also it impacts the game. I mean, you've got this opportunity to watch 2 hours of your favourite sport. You don't want to spend a half an hour lined up waiting for your hot pie
100%.
and chips.
I just remember when I went to the MCG for grand final a couple of years ago, there was people lining up for beers. They were going for half an hour.
Yeah, it's nuts.
No.
So we set about developing a product. I formed a company called MyVenue. We worked on what's called a minimum viable product. We worked on something that we could demonstrate to people. That really happened through 2019, and I was still very much, do you want to do this again?
Yeah, it's almost identical to the question.
Is this a path that you want to go down? And I talked to a few old contacts in the US, and they're like, no one's really smashing it. The old product, the Quest product that had been acquired by this listed company, hadn't been developed and maintained like it should have been. And by the end of 2019, and I was involved with the startup sector in South Australia, I thought, I wouldn't mind having a go at doing this as a startup. So as a startup, you've got to go through these gates, and you develop a business plan, and you go out and convince someone or a group of people to invest in your company, and then they sort of hold you to account because you've got to go back and report to them. You may need to go back and get some more money. So I developed this business plan, started selling it to mums and dads, friends of family, and friends of friends, and so at the end of 2019, early 2020, I went out, convinced people to invest in this company that was going to change the world, and got some funding from the government, employed our first engineers in the beginning of February 2020, and then by the end of March, it was just like the end of the world. COVID hit. Venues shut down, hospitality shut down. You couldn't travel. I was like, this is the worst decision of my life. This is just horrible.
What have I done?
What an idiot. What were you thinking? But really, we, in hindsight, we didn't really expect to make any sales in the first year because we were still getting our product right. And so, in a way, it helped us catch up to the competition, because the competition was all getting smashed up. They weren't making money. They weren't doing sales. and we weren't doing sales or making money either, but we didn't expect to.
Yeah.
So we had this year to help.
You had the investment there
Yeah.
too. So it's an app, isn't it?
Well, it's multiple apps now, and it's a hosted solution. So it's a browser-based back office,
Yep.
and it's multiple apps in a stadium and arena environment. So just for people listening or watching, it's the product allows food and beverage and merchandise to be sold or delivered to a fan anywhere in a venue. So a suite, in their seat, in the parking lot, car park, selling hot dogs or coffees or merchandise, scanning, ordering on your app and going and picking it up, ordering on your app and having it delivered to your seat, ordering on your app and having it delivered to your suite, to your table. So restaurants, concessions, burgers, bars, anywhere in a venue, a sports venue, or an entertainment venue, where food and beverage and merchandise is either sold or delivered to a fan or a customer.
It's like an Uber in type, but in a stadium almost. Or
Yeah,
Uber Eats.
It checks all the boxes. Yeah. We integrate with them as well.
Yeah, so. That's amazing. So do you think that we've gone from zero to, I don't know, from a revenue perspective, if you're happy to share it, but you've grown a fair bit in the past couple of years and grown exponentially. Tell us a little bit about that growth and what that looks like from a team perspective. And do you believe that your Quest background is the reason for the success, that you've done this before?
Oh, there's no doubt. So starting from 2020, by the end of 2020, we had our first customer.
It was Adelaide.
It was a pub.
Oh, no.
It was a pub. It was a cafe, actually.
Okay.
It was either Cathedral Hotel or this coffee shop in King William Road where I used to go, that I convinced this lady to put our point of sale system in. It was just one point of sale terminal.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I need a place where I can, where we can trial this, and it was those two places. And from there, we were able to obviously get our product right for a hospitality environment. But we had two significant opportunities in 2021. The first one was a new or a revamped minor league baseball facility in Kansas City called the Kansas City Monarchs.
Mm-hmm.
And they needed a new point of sale system. And I knew a guy.
How did you hear about it?
So there was a mate that I had in Denver, and he wanted to come and work for us. And he said, I know a guy. And anyway, so we did the demo over Teams.
Yeah, wow.
Over Microsoft Teams. And from there, we were able to sell this product into the US. We couldn't travel over there. We could travel over there, but you couldn't come back.
Yeah.
So we did that, and that was pretty good. It was a small venue, 50 points of sale. And then from there, we were able to, in a sort of, again, a lucky moment, we were able to secure a pilot for our product at the Miami Dolphins, which is an NFL team in Southern Florida.
If you don't know Miami Dolphins, then
then
you don't know sport, right?
We did this pilot in 2021. For their NFL season, and then by the end of 21, they said, "Look, we really like your product. We really like you guys. We've got the Miami Open Tennis coming up, which is in March. Can we launch your product at the Miami Open Tennis?" And we were like, "I hope so." And we did. And by then we could travel over there. So this is 2022. And we went live at the Miami Open Tennis. I was over there at the time. But it really was a eureka moment. I mean, we were turning this product on. We'd not done anything at this scale before, and we were like, it should work.
Yeah.
And it did. It was great. Then we did the Miami Formula One, which was just out of this world. So it was 1,000 point of sale terminals, 100,000 Americans all drinking beer and eating hot dogs, and all the Formula One circus had come to town, and it was amazing. I mean, the adrenaline was back. By then, I knew that the adrenaline was back. I mean, when they rolled out this American flag on Pitt Straight, there was, the size of a large housing block, and they sang the national anthem. It was all back. Yeah. Everything was back from the old days, and that was the beginning of.
You've done it again.
Amazing, yeah. I mean, it's Groundhog Day in many respects, but better.
Yeah.
Better this time. Better this time because it's more enjoyable. Kids are growing up. My wife and I live in the US. We travel together a lot.
Yeah.
It's just a great experience. I'm not on my own like I was or felt back in the 2000s.
Yeah.
And we're growing quickly. We're growing quicker than Quest.
Yeah.
And we're I think having more fun.
Yeah.
Which is great. So yeah, happy to talk about growth.
I'll accept the invite to the next Miami Formula One as well, and anything.
Well, we
else
did. We also did the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
We did the Super Bowl last year.
Oh, so now you're gloating, right?
And so we've also got the host venue for the 2028 LA Olympics. So all the track and field will be at LA Memorial Coliseum, which is the same venue that hosted the Olympics in 1984 and also in 1932. So it's going to be,
you guys
the fun continues.
And this is where I was saying the potential unicorn. You guys are onto something here. I think you were the first venue, 2020 venues in 2022, another 60 in 2023, already another 40 in this year alone. I can't even imagine how many sporting events you're going to at this point, let alone really trying to just understand the growth and scale. I mean, operationally, how have you grown and scaled this so quickly? And you sat there a couple of seconds ago saying, we hope it works. I mean, this is a big deal. If that doesn't work, then effectively, the Americans are pretty ruthless.
Yeah,
If it doesn't work, they'll pull that as quick as what they put it into and install it. So how did you manage that?
So you got to get good people. You got to get good people on board. There's no doubt about that. And we've business is a lot about momentum, and momentum is a very important. More in the US than anywhere else, I think. If you've got momentum, then that's infectious. It's infectious not only with your customers and who you're selling to, but it's also infectious with who wants to work for you.
Yeah.
And we've got, without wanting to brag, we've got dozens, hundreds.
Yeah.
We put an advertisement up the other day for a role within the organisation. We had 600 applications in 20 hours, and we had to take it down.
Yeah, wow.
So there's a lot of that. So this is exciting, right? It's exciting. You've got to choose the right people, and they've got to choose you. So you've got to promote your organisation. You've got to promote your momentum. Social media is very powerful, and then you need to engage and empower the good team members.
Yeah.
So we're doubling about every 9 months at the moment. So last year we did around 14 million in revenue, and you can do the maths from there. So on what we expect to do this year. So, and we're on target. We're on target to do what we to continue that doubling every 9 months.
You mentioned Groundhog Day. You pinching yourself? It's happening all again, like in the same world. Like it's not like normally people just change industries. You've just gone, hang on, I can improve this yet again.
Yeah.
And
of course. I mean, not all the time. I mean, there's plenty of problems to solve every day, which is what keeps you busy and keeps the energy. But in quiet moments, we've got my wife and I live in an apartment in Atlanta. It's on the 15th floor, and we look out over the city. And some nights I'll be sitting out on the deck out there, looking at the city lights, and you think, wow, it's all happening again.
Yeah.
But I think this time, I'm not wanting to be, too reflective here. It's more about the employees and more about some of those early investors for me. That this fear of failure and wanting to do the right thing by our team and grow this business. We have an employee share ownership program, so all of our employees that have worked for us for longer than 12 months have shares in the business, and that's really important to me. Is that these hardworking, committed people that we have, and we're nearly 60 people now, can enjoy the fruits of their labour and can feel like they're contributing to something they own.
So it's like a profit sharing at the end of the year. Is that how?
No, it's that they get shares in the business. So
Yeah.
they get shares in the business, so that at some stage, when there's some sort of event, whether we list or whether someone buys us or whatever happens, they'll
And
be
it's
able to sell those shares at a profit.
Ordinary shares or employee shares?
Well, our employees get options,
Yeah,
but they after a certain amount of time, after 18 months or thereabouts, they can convert those shares to options, and convert those options to shares.
Yeah.
And they are they're ordinary shares.
Yeah.
I mean, they're shareholders.
Yeah, great.
Have part of
Well done.
ownership of the company.
Great model. Do you have a team over there as well? Is it so? How big is the team over in there?
So we've got about 20 or 20, 25, no, probably about 20 people in the US.
Yeah. Are you looking anywhere else to expand?
We have venues in Canada.
Yeah.
And we also have venues in the UK. That they're big opportunities for us.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to get too far ahead of ourselves. I mean, America is a big country.
Yeah, no
with
doubt.
a lot of people.
Mate, their college games are bigger than our AFL games.
Yeah. We do the we do the Michigan football stadium.
Yeah, wow.
Which they call the Big House, which is 113,000 people.
It's
capacity.
unbelievable.
It's the biggest stadium in North America. This is an interesting statistic. They've had 300 football games in a row, college football games in a row, with over 100,000 people at every game.
That is amazing.
And bear in mind that football in Michigan during the football season, which is in the wintertime in this open stadium, can be pretty miserable.
Yeah.
And they just don't.
You see some of the video clips on social media around the way the Americans go. They just are crazy over this. Well, I remember you said something. The Americans buy hot dogs the way the Australians buy beers.
Well, it was a eureka moment when I was in 1999 when I went to the Staples Center when we opened Staples Center. We did all the point of sale when the Staples Center first opened, and the LA Lakers and the Kings and the Clippers. I think it was a Bruce Springsteen concert was the opening night. And it was a real eureka moment for me. I looked at what was happening in these stands, and it wasn't like a bar in the US, which is very sophisticated. You have a server and you don't move around. You sit in this seat. If you move somewhere else, all hell breaks loose because they go, the tips are payable over here.
Yeah.
But in a stadium or an arena, the way hot dogs are served and purchased is so much like an Australian pub. They're 4 deep or 10 deep at the bar, and someone's waving a $50 bill to try and get attention. Well, it's a bit like that in stadiums and arenas, and you have this, period of time. You have casualised workforce. In Australia, it tends to be uni students and international students, and people in their early stages of their career. And in the US, in stadiums and arenas, it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's so good. You would have experienced so many sort of setbacks in your Quest life when you were CE and leading that company. You would have had a lot of failures, and you would have learned from them along the way. What's one of the new failures that you've had at MyVenue that's kind of been groundbreaking for you guys? That really, another sliding door moment where you went, actually, thankfully that happened so we can learn from it and grow and scale.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you get failures all the time. Yeah. We've had some, we've built our product around cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is very important for us.
Yep, no doubt.
We've had, and scale.
Yep.
So this is all hosted. We in the US, there's this standard called SOC 2, which is all about protecting consumer data from a cyber attack or from some sort of event that may cause that to be that information to be exposed. So we've learned a lot along the way about that. We have had some incidents where our product has not performed like we expected.
From a cyber point of view?
Well, not necessarily from a cyber point of view, fortunately, touch wood, we haven't had any cyber attacks yet, but we have had problems where an integration with a third-party organisation has caused a huge load on our back office, and that's meant that things haven't performed the way we would like them to.
Yeah.
In our industry, that's critical.
Yeah.
Right. You've got 90 minutes for most sports games to make 80% of your revenue.
Yeah.
You better make sure you're ready for that.
100%. Yeah. Very good. As MyVenue continues to grow, like what excites you the most about the future of MyVenue and what you guys are doing?
I mean, every day. I mean, I get excited about a growing business and about seeing our people engaged. And it's more than just winning deals. I got to say that. I mean, I always say, winning a big deal, it keeps me excited. Maybe 24 hours if it's a really big deal. More is about the organisation. How are we growing? How are we going to scale? How are we going to become more stable? How are we going to be a good employer of people? How are we going to create a great environment where really good people can put their career trust in us?
Yeah.
That's what I want, and we're growing quickly. We're doing a lot in the US. We've got more to do, but then also there's the UK and Europe, the Middle East, Asia. I always say the Americanization of world sport is happening at pace.
Yeah.
Americans do sports and entertainment like no one else.
Yeah.
You've seen the Super Bowl. You've seen the way they do the halftime shows and the cheerleaders and the marching bands and
It's unbelievable.
and everything else that comes with that. And that know-how, whether it's technology or processes or infrastructure, is being injected around the world. Whether it's the Asian Cup soccer or the World Cup or the Olympic Games, the American machinery rolls into town, and inevitably they leave their know-how and they leave their technology once this big event's over, whatever it is.
Yeah.
There's a big chunk of
Yeah,
that
well, you
stuff.
see it here in Australia, don't you? With the NBL, they're mimicking the way the Americans go about their basketball. Basketball's never been more entertaining in my even with the cricket, the 2020, the way in which they get the fireworks and the dancing and everything else that goes on. Going back to the people aspect, vision, the values for your business, I know are super critical, and we helped you. We helped you build. We helped you build those values.
We still use those values today. That was probably in our first year.
Yeah, I remember very early on, you guys were starting up, and it was Dave that your COO at the time said, "Actually, Dan, can you guys help us set this up?" And I know that you still hold those values very, very true to today.
Yeah. So without a good culture in your organisation, it's a shell.
Yeah.
The people, if you have culture, you've got predictability and you've got a place that hopefully is fun to work, where people can grow together. So I've always, and this is something that during that quiet time that we had in the early 90s, I learned about having some sort of model that your team signs up to that helps motivate and helps guide the overall development of your organisation. And I like the term core values.
Yep.
I think that makes a lot of sense to me. It's easy. It's an easy message to sell. It's easy for your team to sign up to.
Yep.
And we have 4 core values. So the first one is make it happen.
Yep.
Which obviously means if it's worth doing, do it now.
Correct.
Work it out.
Yep.
Improve every day. Obviously, get better. Learn from your mistakes.
Yep.
The next one is successful together, and that's successful as a team, or successful with our customers or with our suppliers. And then the last one is proud of what we do. So feel good about what we achieve as an organisation and what we achieve as individuals. And we have core value awards. We have core values in our signature. We have core values that are communicated when employees join the team. These are our pillars which we use to build our culture.
I love it. What's your role as CEO, do you, in your opinion, in maintaining and upholding that culture?
Well, I think the CEO has you have a responsibility to lead your executive team. We have a CFO and a sort of chief financial officer, chief commercial officer, chief technology officer, field services, venue success. So we have these various parts of our organisation. So as a CEO, you need to be the first among equals, for want of a better term, within that group, knowing that ultimately the buck stops with you and you report to a board, but we're a team, right? That team runs the day-to-day, and then below, well, I don't want to say below that, but within that structure is the people that make it happen. So although I mightn't have direct contact with every one of those people on a regular basis, you do have a responsibility to be, I think, the face of the organisation, the cultural, lead by example, I think is probably as good a term as any. So we have an all hands or what we call an all company meeting every 2 weeks. So everyone dials in from around the world. It is the best hour and a half of our 2-week period. Everyone has an opportunity to speak. Everyone talks about what they've done in the last 2 weeks that's critical, or that was fun, or that's interesting, what's coming up in the next couple of weeks, and then we go around everyone in the organisation. So, and it's really important because we're a very geographic, for a small organisation, we're very geographically diverse. We've got people all over the US, in Mexico, obviously in Australia, and a lot of those people are never going to meet face to face, but you need to have a relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. It's awesome. Before we get into some quick fire questions at the end of this podcast, I just want to, I guess, touch back on some lessons that you've learned along the way. You've been a leader in business and in community, and I'm just interested to hear your core leadership lesson. If you were sharing something right now with a young leader, an emerging leader, what would that lesson be?
I think you need to pick your leadership style on who or where you are. Sometimes you need a leader that's down in the trenches, being involved with the day-to-day, dealing with a problem, dealing with an opportunity. Sometimes you need a leader that's, face painted blue, charging out across the battlefield with a flag going, follow me. Sometimes you need a leader who's back, sitting back and directing the troops and trying to look at the big picture. But I don't think you ever want to lose sight of those different leadership styles. You're never going to be all of one or all of the other. You need to be the leader for whatever the situation is. You need to decide what sort of a leader are you going to be today or in this situation.
Yeah, amazing. Insight there. Thank you. If you talked about the day today there, and I think I know that you've said this because you sent me I read your valedictorian speech that you did for Emmanuel College, and there was something that you wrote in there that really stuck out at me, stuck out at me, I should say, which is don't be too impatient and don't question the day-to-day too much. And you went on to quote, it takes 20 years of hard work to become an overnight success. That's something that really stuck with me. The day-to-day, don't be too impatient and don't question the day-to-day too much. Can you elaborate on what that means for you and what that means in regards to leading a business or a young CEO or a leader who is, like you said, can be focused on the day-to-day?
So I think that we're all a bit impatient. Well, people who are ambitious, they're like, I'm going to start at the bottom and I'm going to work hard and work my way to the top, and I don't care if it takes all day.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
And I'm like, no,
Yeah.
that's going to take time.
Yeah. Correct.
And there's certain gates that you need to jump through,
100%.
and there's certain learnings that you need to do. And there's school of hard knocks, which sometimes you have to learn by experience. You can't learn by reading from a textbook. So I do think that there is, you know, I love it when people are ambitious. I love it when someone, you know, comes. I was second interviewing someone the other day, and I said, what do you want to do in 3 years' time? And this guy goes, I want your job. And I'm like, I love that.
Yeah.
You know, the guy's like 28 years old.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I love it. So I think ambition's great, and it's not to be crushed, but it's also about jumping through these gates or going through these gates in your career as your career develops, but thinking consciously about that. And I had, for whatever reason, I've had these 5-year plans through my life where I've actually documented those plans and said, what do I want to do with my career? What do I want to do family-wise, and what do I want to do community-wise? And then tried to use that as a guide for where I'm putting my energy.
I love that. Do you think that the impatience, I mean, you said we're all a little bit impatient, especially in the entrepreneurial space, or do you think that the impatience can drive success in the regard that it creates urgency, but then in the same token, it can create chaos and lack of clarity, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah. No, you. I mean, I'm terribly impatient.
Yeah.
You ask Michelle, my wife. I'm a terrible driver.
Yeah.
I'm terrible at you know, anything where I'm lined up. I'm like, what's gone wrong? Something's gone wrong.
Yeah.
Someone needs to come and fix this.
Yeah.
You know, I'm impatient with our team, with our staff. They're like, oh yeah, I'm going to do that next week, and I'm like, well, why don't we do that now?
Yeah. Why does it take so long?
This is important.
Yeah.
So I'm hopelessly impatient, but I'm also, with certain things, I'm like, well, you know, that's part of a big picture. We need to sort of move there. So I think with the big picture items, you don't want to be too impatient. But with the little stuff, the minutiae, I'm quite impatient. But you know, mostly it's part of a bigger plan. Not that I'm a schemer and I'm like, I just need to get you there or whatever. But I think you need to know broadly where you're going, and you need to know what are the key things that need to be done today.
Yeah. Are you impatient because you're a sucker for detail? You like the small things that matter. You know, like having a word misspelled on the website. Yeah, like that. Do you know what I mean? Because it just takes away. I'm having some of the biggest organisations in the world, like the LA Lakers, the Miami Dolphins, whatnot, looking at our product, and there's a spelling mistake. Like it.
People will tell you in our business, they're like, "Oh my goodness, this guy's a pain."
Yeah, but do you think that's warranted? I mean, because it seems to be a trend that.
Well, I mean, with certain things, I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and sometimes I look at it and I think, well, gee, you're a bit inconsistent there, and you know, maybe you overshot the mark a little bit with picking that, you know, minutiae up. But you know, I do think if something's worth doing, it's worth doing right. But it's also not worth doing right if it's going to take, you know, 3 months and it should only take 3 days.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Great way to spin out of that one. Last question before we jump into some quick fire. You have said earlier that mentors are important and have been critical in your success throughout your life. Who's been a mentor that's had the biggest impact on you, and how do you now approach mentorship when you're offering it to others?
So I've had 3 mentors that were, I mean, more. One guy who gave me a Morse code and some electronics when I was in my early teens that influenced me. But my dad, Max Stollznow, he's died now, but he was a great mentor for me. David Brown, who was my first bosses when I was an engineer, and then my father-in-law, actually, John Vine, who worked at Mitsubishi, ran Mitsubishi here in Adelaide, ran the production plant, retired at 55. And a year and a half later, after they'd travelled around Australia, my mother-in-law came to me and she's like, and you know, Quest was growing, and we were doing all our own manufacturing. We had our own, And my mother-in-law's come to me one night after a family dinner, and she's like, "You guys are growing quickly, are you? You doing manufacturing?" Yeah. And she goes, "Can you give him a job?" And
he's driving me insane.
And he was just got to get him out of the house.
Yeah.
So he came and worked for us, and he ended up having another career.
Yeah.
He travelled the world. I learned a lot from him. I learned a lot about. He's far more patient than I am.
Yeah.
And he's very disciplined. And I've learned some good skills or attributes from him too.
Yeah, that's amazing. How do you approach mentorship now?
Well, mentorship's critical. I think mentors are really powerful, and you can have mentors. Mostly, a mentor can be someone other than your parents. I mean, I mentioned my dad, and my relationship with my dad developed over through the course of our life together. But you can't make yourself a mentor. Someone's you can't just lob into. But I've helped some CEOs, and people have come to me, and I've met with them weekly or monthly for a period of time, and then they've moved on. I've certainly put my hand up within our own company if people are interested in asking me questions. I'm very open with people about all the good and the bad and the ugly, so to speak. So I think mentorship is critical, and I think mentorship is a great way of giving back to the community. And I know that I've sort of stepped back from some of that naturally as we've now moved to the US at the beginning of last year and busy with MyVenue. But whenever the MyVenue journey finishes for me, then and it might not finish. I might still end up on the board and be a pain there somewhere. But I think that that giving back to community, and I see that there's a big opportunity for mentors in the startup sector in South Australia, and Lot 14 is a great environment to do that, and people there's a lot of people out there that are sort of 60 to 80 or beyond. I mean, my father-in-law is going to kill me. He's going to go. But there's a lot of ways that you can give back to society, and one of them is through mentorship of whomever.
Yeah. No, I love that. Love that approach. Rightio. Now, some quick fire questions. Now, these are new.
Right.
I've rewritten these. These are the first time
I get caught out.
I've used them. There's a couple that I've kept the same because I like them too much. But for the most part, they're 80% new. So you're getting tested on them.
I'm the guinea pig.
You're the guinea pig. So I'll start off with, I'm a big reader. We're big readers here. So this was one of the original ones that I cannot get rid of. But what is one book that you've recommended or gifted the most that you feel that's had a big
So
impact?
I'm not a big book giver, but I'm a big book loaner.
Yeah.
I've had this one book that I've loaned to, I don't know, a dozen people or more, and it keeps coming back.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing, because sometimes you loan books that
that's right.
they don't come back. But this book's called Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell, and I just love it. I love it because in this book, Malcolm Gladwell develops this concept of 10,000 hours. 10,000 hours to become an expert. He says basically that freaks or business leaders or people that are successful in life or in their community or whatever don't just happen. He says there's all these things that lead up to that, and I think that it has a message for every one of us. Is when you look back, and you may be 25 or 30 or 35 or 40, and you look back and you go, well, what's my 10,000 hours? What have I learned in the last 20 years?
Correct.
And where have is it, music? Is it technology? Is it leadership? Is it community? Where's my 10,000 hours? And if I'm not working on that, then what am I going to do about that for the future?
Yeah, I love that. Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell was one of my favourites. There's another one, and I don't know who actually developed the concept, whether it was Robert Greene with his book Mastery or Malcolm Gladwell, because they both came out roughly the same time, and they both have the same concept. It is about time and becoming a master. They talk about all different examples, but yeah, that's a great one. I literally live my life by that.
Right.
My girls are big basketballers, and there's a famous basketball player, unfortunately deceased now, Kobe Bryant,
Oh, yeah.
and he's got the Mamba mentality. And the Mamba mentality was all about time. It was about doing more and more than the next person. If you're doing 3 hours a day and the other person's doing one hour a day, then effectively by the end of that week you're so far up. By the end of that year, you're so far ahead of everyone else, and that's just
Good lessons.
Amazing lessons. What is one lesson that's taking you the longest to learn?
We've touched on it already. I'm very impatient.
Yeah,
And it's not always a good attribute. Plenty of people would say that that I'm a pain.
Yeah.
That
I'm in the same category, man.
I expect too much.
What's some of the best advice you've ever received?
Lots of advice over the years. My dad wrote me a letter when I was at boarding school, and he didn't write to me very often. Mostly my mum wrote to me, and he wrote me this letter when I was in year 12, and I was a bit of a cruiser. I was a bit of a, like, hey, I just need to pass, I just need to get in. And he wrote me a letter, and he described this race, or it was a marathon or a 10,000 meter race or something, and he basically painted this picture of, and my dad was a bit of a storyteller. He painted this picture that, at least for this part of my life, I was in the last lap of the secondary school race, if you like, and I was well positioned. I was fourth, and the finish line was in sight, and Dad was like, and he was quite articulate, that why cruise and finish fourth? Why not, dig in,
put the foot
see
down,
if you can get to third, and then if seconds within sight, have a crack at that, and then who knows, you may even win the race. Yeah. And I did reflect on that a lot about whether because I think it's had an impact on me about, life's fun, but there's also a serious part of life that you've got to, that you owe it to yourself. You owe it to
do the work,
your opportunity to actually try and make a difference and to do your best. Yeah,
I love that. How has failure or an apparent failure set you up for success? Like, do you have a favorite failure?
None of my failures are favorites.
Yeah.
I've failed so many places. I've never looked at it as a failure. Yeah. I've always looked at it as a learning experience. And I know that's a cliche, and I know that sounds horrible, but it's honestly
it's silver lining. It really is.
It's a bit like success. You don't want to get too hung up on success. You don't want to get too hung up on failure. I mean, I've done things wrong, and I've kicked why did I do that? You idiot. We've all done a bit of that. But I think after, kicking yourself for 24 hours, you go, right, how are we going to avoid that happening again?
Yeah, absolutely. What's one talent that you wish you had but you don't?
I wish I was a better listener.
Yeah.
I wish I was a better listener.
And what brings that on? You just
maybe it comes with my impatience.
Yeah.
That I'm just my head's racing, and people talk to me and they go, oh, I did this and I'm did that, and I'm like, oh, I've got something to add to that.
Yeah, yeah.
And
do you think that listening comes from? Do you think that you figure out what people are saying before they've even said it, therefore you cut in or whatever it might be?
I mean, that sounds horrible, but probably.
Yeah. No, but do you know what I mean? Like people are saying it, and as they go, they're taking a long time to explain, and you go, yeah, I know what you're saying, so you kind of just cut in, and it might come across that you're not such a good listener, but you're actually really understanding what they're saying.
Yeah, maybe. My wife would probably disagree.
100%. If you could swap lives with anyone for a day, who would it be?
I love politics.
Yeah,
I got to be honest. Yeah. I'm a closet politician.
Are you really?
So
you're watching with great detail what's happening here.
I love the. I wouldn't be a good politician. I'm not saying that, but I do think good politicians are really important for the world, and strong leaders are good for the world. So, pick a leader. Any leader, I'd love to be a leader for a day.
In the political word,
anywhere really, but a political leader, sure. Yeah.
If you could have a gigantic billboard anywhere in the world with anything on it, what would it say and why?
Oh, I mean, again, not to be too cliched, but I'd come back to one of the MyVenue core values: make it happen.
Make it happen.
I mean, you could say have a crack, but it's probably better to say make it happen. You know, today's the day.
Yeah, have a crack could get taken a
that's
few
right.
different.
could go anywhere, but you know, I think more generally, I think have a crack might work in Australia. I'm not sure how that would work in the US, but certainly make it happen. Today's another opportunity. What are you going to do today that's going to make your life better or someone else's life better?
Yeah, that's really good. If you were to start your own podcast, what would it be about? Driving. I love driving.
I'm an impatient driver.
Yeah. Oh, as in
it would be on effective driving. I would interview the best drivers and the worst drivers. I would try to find out why someone's a bad driver. Yeah. Because I get on the road and I'm like, oh my goodness, how did you get your driver's license? Get out of my way.
And they're saying the same thing about you. And
well, I'm sure they probably think, who's this lunatic? He's so aggressive. But I like people that make quick decisions, know where they want to go, and I let people in. Yeah. But when I'm leaving a gap to let someone in, and they're sort of like looking at the trees, and I'm like, hello.
Nothing more.
And but there's just, I can give you a zillion examples of where people are driving with one hand down, or they're arms up here, and they're talking to the person next door, and I'm like, you're driving a car. You could run into someone anywhere, in a split second. You've got this opportunity to get from A to B. Bring your whoever's in the car with you safely there, and make sure that you make everyone else's life as reasonable as possible.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Do a good job of it.
I think you've done way too much research in this already. If you could become famous for one thing, what would it be?
Being a good dad.
Being a good dad.
Being a good dad.
Do you reckon you could become famous for that?
I don't know whether I could. But I think it's the most wonderful opportunity in life is to be, and not everyone who wants to be a parent can be a parent, and I acknowledge that. But maybe you could expand it to being a good mentor. You don't have to be a good dad. Maybe being a good uncle or a good, or a good mentor. But helping bring the next generation along in whatever way that is. And it requires, multiple skills, of course. You need to be disciplined. Sometimes you need to be firm, but other times you need to be walking alongside someone or walking behind them. And I love being a dad.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's I love that one. I think I said this to someone the other day. I think the emotion, the ups and downs that come with being a parent is something that I don't think you can experience in any other way, right? Like you're trying to grow and educate whilst loving, whilst disciplining. Like it's it's just this concoction, like you said soup earlier, like it's this concoction and whirlpool of emotion that I don't think you can experience any other way. What's the first thing that you would do if you became invisible?
Probably go into Parliament House and walk into the PM's office and sit there and listen to what happens over a few days.
It would be good to,
I don't want to overstate it, but I especially in America, I love American politics. I love politics more generally. I read a lot about politics. I was fortunate enough to go to the White House last year.
Oh, very good.
And I was fortunate enough to be there with Australia's Prime Minister Albanese when he was there and spend time with him, and also be, let's just say, Biden was there as well. Yeah. And whatever your political persuasion, it was, for me, an awesome experience. I mean, going into the White House and seeing the Oval Office and seeing the Rose Garden but I would do that. If I was invisible for a day, I'd be wandering around the Parliament houses of the world, seeing what I can learn.
Two out of our last three guests have been at the White House. We had Tara Brumfitt on recently.
Yeah, I think she might have been there when I was.
Was all part
around the same time.
There you go. Oh, were you one of the? She said that people were stealing forks and knives. Were you one of those people?
No. Well, nothing that I'd met.
No, not stealing. I think Anthony Albanese made a joke. That you better you check the bags of the Australians on the way out, because they'll no doubt fleece some stuff on the way out. So very good. If you had one superhero power, what would it be? This is an old.
So I would have a cape.
Yeah.
And I would fly everywhere. Other than walking.
S on your shirt? Or?
Other than walking, every mode of transport frustrates me.
Yeah.
So I can. I love walking. Right, I can walk and I think, and I'm, on the phone or reading some emails, and I love walking. I love the outdoors, and I don't mind walking. I love walking in nature, where it's busy or whatever. I hate flying.
Yeah.
I hate traveling in an Uber. I hate traveling in a cab.
Yeah.
I hate traveling in traffic.
Yeah.
I'm just not a good. Any other mode of transport is frustrating for me. So I would fly.
Absolutely. What about teleport? Would be better then again.
Well, if you watch the Superman movies, it's just as quick as teleporting. He just goes up, flies around the world, and comes back down again. So that'll be easy. Superman.
And my last and favorite joke, my favorite question of the whole podcast is, what's your best dad joke?
I've got so many. Well, I should be fun, and I think dads have an obligation to be a bit dorky.
Yeah.
And I actually love playing tricks on kids.
Yeah.
And I love the joke. I love making kids laugh, but I love playing tricks on them. I think playing tricks on them or telling them jokes helps them be curious and helps them distrust a little bit. I mean, you don't want to bring them up being, having anxiety, but you want to make them question and go, that doesn't sound quite right to me.
100%.
Or what are you getting at? So my favourite dad jokes, can I tell three?
Let's do it.
So these are all associated with hankies that you blow your nose in, or with kings. So one of them is, who's the king of the hankies?
Who's the king of the hankies?
The hanky chief.
That's horrible.
Which kids love.
Yeah.
And the next one is, where does the king keep his armies?
Where does the king keep his armies?
Up his sleeveys. And then the final one. And these are bad, okay?
Yeah,
these are not aimed at a teenager. No. These are aimed at like a 3 or a 4-year-old.
No.
And the last one is, how do you make a handkerchief dance?
How do you make a handkerchief dance?
You put a little boogie in it.
Brilliant.
So, lots
of
of fun.
Well done.
Thank you.
I've never heard a handkerchief joke, and you've just told me 3.
Yeah,
so there you go. Thank you so much for your time today, Tim. It's been amazing hearing you and your journey, and just the way in which you've gone about scaling, both with Quest and with MyVenue, your products all around the world, and the stories that you've shared with us today have been amazing. I am going to be watching with great intrigue about what you guys do in the next few years. I think you're onto something. I honestly believe that you potentially could become that unicorn company that come out of Australia, especially South Australia. So we'll claim that one to the cows come home. Kudos to you and your team for everything that you guys are doing, and can't wait to see what the future holds.
Thanks very much. Thanks for your time.
No worries.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Take care. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for listening to the podcast all. You can check out the show notes if there was anything of interest to you, and find out more about us at SynergyIQ.com.au. I am going to ask, though, if you did like the podcast, it would absolutely mean the world to me if you could subscribe, rate, and review. And if you didn't like it, that's all right too. There's no need to do anything. Take care, guys. All the best.